Welcome to Concept to Creation, a podcast featuring entrepreneurs who share their business journey. We'll hear what motivated them to turn their dreams into a business. They'll share stories from the trenches of business, from raising capital, creating products or services, navigating regulations, hiring employees, and managing competition and growth. We'll discover their successes and failures, and they'll provide advice for budding entrepreneurs. Now, here's your host and fellow entrepreneur, Mike Konrad.
Welcome to the Concept to Creation podcast. Welcome to this episode. I'm so glad you're back with me today. And on this episode, I am privileged to talk to Dr. Harald Wack. He earned his Ph.D. in chemistry from Johns Hopkins University here in the United States back in 2002. And he began his career at Zestron America's headquarters, where he took over that, I don't know, branch is the right word, we'll call it a branch, reported to his father, Oskar Wack, back in Germany. We're going to discuss with Harry, as he prefers to be called, his journey with Zestron, starting off with running the American unit, and then eventually taking over the entire company. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Harald Wack. Thanks for being here today, Harry.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course. You and I have known each other for quite a few years. We both are in the same industry. You are on the juice side, me on the mechanical side.
Yes.
And we have, therefore, the same customer. So I'm quite familiar with what Zestron does, although I'm not familiar with how you got to what you do, which is the whole purpose of this podcast. So let's bring our audience up to date. For those people who are way outside of our industry and don't already know who Zestron is, let our audience know what Zestron does, where you're located, and just give the elevator pitch on Zestron, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. We are in the specialty chemical business. We've worked on making a name for ourselves in cleaning circuit boards. That's what the beginning was, and to a large extent it still is. Meanwhile, we're sort of a elaborated service provider for the industry when it comes to reliability, focusing around cleaning for one part, for many other problem-solving aspects as well. But in the end, a large part of our business is still supporting cleaning processes, be it from the front end to the back end. Anywhere where electronics are integrated, we try to add value by introducing and including cleaning, which serves the simple purpose of increasing reliability and ensuring a higher quality, be it for the purpose of subsequent processes, wire bonding or coating or others, or simply just removing contamination to reduce failure on the board, be it due to environment or moisture or other factors. So our product you don't necessarily see after the manufacturing, but you know it's cleaned based on various analytical methods we offer to our customers, and we serve them in terms of services afterwards. But in the end, we help add value. And like you said before, Mike, you are one of the leading providers in mechanical support in the cleaning equipment. We're one of the leading, if not the leading provider globally in terms of the product goes into the cleaning machine. And at the end, we both hope, I think, that the customer gets something that is to his satisfaction and it's clean, and he can, like I said, continue with other processes afterwards. So just be happy that it's clean. And,
sure. We both work in an industry where our products are not seen. And almost nobody outside of our very small circle has any idea that circuit boards are even cleaned, right?
Correct.
I'm sure you get the same response I get when people ask what you do, and you say, you make chemicals to clean circuit boards, and they go, oh, do they get dirty? Or I thought they can't get wet. I mean, all those things. It's a very behind-the-scenes process, right? Very important, but a very behind-the-scenes process.
Yeah, a lot of people typically ask if we do clean circuit boards when they come out of the field, then to let them know that we do it during the manufacturing of the boards. The tough part is really the value adding when you don't see it. If you put a component and put solder paste on the boards, you see it. our processes they don't see. And it's truly a very niche industry. But if you think of the impact it has, and that's sort of what you and I I think the whole industry who is within the niche of cleaning benefits from is you want to go into an airplane or you want to use a medical equipment and you want it to function, and you want it to function for a long period of time, because typically those things are expensive or you're dealing with matter of life, and you want to rely on them. And then you think and realize, I think, the additional value that comes from adding a little bit of cost to the BOM is justified.
I think the chemical company several years ago, BASF, they ran a series of commercials to consumers, even though no consumer would ever buy a BASF chemical, right? That's all behind the scenes. And I think their tagline was something to the effect of, we don't make the products you use, we make the products you use better. Right. And I think that can be the same in our industry. We don't make the products you use, we make them more reliable. So you don't just roll out of bed one morning and have a leading company, right? So that's a journey. So let's go back in time. We'll get in our time machine and go back to, I think it was around 1975. You can correct me if I'm wrong, where your father, Oskar, started a business. So what led what was his motivation to start that business? What was that part of the journey like, as you recall?
Well, I start with the goods and the bads. He finished his degree in chemistry, which was a good. He finished in record time. He was a very ambitious young man. He still is, now a few years older. As far as the story goes, because I wasn't here yet, I was born I was in 73, I was born, but too young to really know what he was doing. But he went to Belgium, one of his first jobs, and he worked for Procter & Gamble, a obviously very well-known and successful company. And as a chemist, he was the product manager for Mr. Clean here in Europe. And as a chemist, his job was to create a formulation to make the product better, maybe like BASF you just mentioned, similarly. And so he worked on that for 5 years, but he couldn't stand the hierarchical way of making decisions difficult and slow. And he was fed up after a while, recognizing though what he'd learned and appreciated what he knew after that. Somebody else approached him. I don't know if it was a friend or a business partner at that point, or just an acquaintance, but somebody approached him and said, look, we have this pot company, stainless steel pots in Switzerland, also a pretty well-known brand here in Europe called AMC. And they were looking for a pot cleaner, so a household care product line that needed improvement. And since he had just worked on almost exactly that product line at Procter, he said, sure, that's exactly what I need. And finally, I don't have a boss anymore that tells me what to do. So that was part of his motivation. I think originally as a child, being a post-war child, the story I knew is that there was a friend of his and a father who had a auto dealership, and that dealership was big, and he put a big building up, and he told me a couple of times one of the inspirations for him was to imagine that a human being could put up a building like that. Somehow it seemed inspiring to him that was feasible, and that sort of was that little seed in the back of his mind that, hey, let's put up buildings and make a company and let that be mine. And that combined with the other story sort of leads to why he was ambitious and interested and had skills, marketing skills from Procter and chemistry skills from his degree and education.
And like most entrepreneurs, you mentioned he didn't like the politics of corporate lifestyle, right? And I would imagine he didn't like the drama, he didn't like the politics, he didn't like a typical corporate business environment. I think entrepreneurs all have that in common. I think we make terrible employees because we just we're used to getting what we want, and we're used to just clearing out all the obstacles. Speaking of obstacles, what were some of the obstacles? I know you were only a couple years old when the company was founded, so you probably don't have firsthand memories, but I'm sure you've heard the war stories at the dinner table, probably more times than you care to, right? When I start telling my war stories, everyone who's heard them 30 or 40 times just roll their eyes and go, Mike's doing it again. So what were some of the challenges, particularly back as you either recall or you recall hearing about in the earlier days of Zestron?
Well, in the beginning, as you've been an army of one, and everybody who starts as an army of one, you're tasked with everything. Obviously, from financial to product development to sales, and every person is a little different in their skill set. Some are really good at sales, and they are not so good at developing products, or not as technical. And maybe the next guy is more of a finance person skill set. And so, in the end, you have to do all of it, and you realize that some of the things are not really things you like to do or you're not good at. And I recall a lot of stories. Most of the time we talked at dinner, or he would share things initially. And financing was always a big struggle in the beginning. He saved a few $1,000, and that was his starting capital. He had a couple other guys in there that at some point wanted money, and he didn't have any. So that led to some tension here and there. Having one customer, the company I just mentioned before, led to a struggle of, wow, I can't be dependent on them. I need something else. How can that be that, if they don't order tomorrow, I'm on the street. I don't have an income. So that was a continuous story that still exists in this company to this date, that you always look for alternatives to build your business units, to add to them, to make it more solid and more international, less risk, to not be dependent on banks. That story, red line. I think everybody faces that, and everybody at some point runs into a financial situation of some sort. I remember a period in the 80s, probably company was 10 years old, roughly, more or less, and the banks stopped his credit line. It just made it due from one day to another, and all of a sudden you don't have that money. If you finance something long term and all of a sudden they turn the hose off, kind of tough. And that was close to his breaking point at that point, because I was a kid. I was 10 maybe, and I think the whole family remembered. He just would sit at dinner table and stoic. He wouldn't say anything. He was just done.
I think we all remember days like that, right? They were scary, but they were real. And I'll bet that is part of the ingredients that forged who he is today. If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. And
that's sort of what it is. If you can climb out the hole, you don't want to ever fall back into it. And you put measures in place, you learn from it, and you try to make it better, be more independent. And to this date, part of why we've become successful, it's one little part of it, but we've always been very conservative on the spending, and whatever money we make, we save, and we put it to the side when we need it for investments. And so when times come that we need to, buy a new building or start a production somewhere, typically we do it out of cash and don't have to ask banks for it. And that takes a long time of endurance and just putting the company first. And that's one of the things we've learned all along. He and I, we always put the company first. It's not about me on a Monday making a decision because it's Harry and it's Monday. No, the company will always come first. And it's not about a personality or whoever runs the company. It's about the good of the company and the responsibility you carry for everybody in here.
Yeah, I think that's 75%. I've said this many times on the show, but quoting the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistic, probably very similar in Germany and anywhere else in the world, 75% of all new business startups are gone by year 10. They fail. 50% by year 5. I think it's 30 or 35% by year 2. So it's definitely a high risk endeavor. And I think there are, as the more I talk to business owners and the more experience I have in business, I start to see a common denominator for those businesses that are successful and those businesses that are not successful. And on the non-successful side, part of it is, killing the golden goose, so to speak. You mentioned that you always put the company first. Well, there's a certain, a little bit of a seduction when a business owner gets their first taste of success. Suddenly there's a little bit of cash flow, and you've worked so hard, and you need a vacation, and it sure be nice to get a new car, and I've seen it. I've seen other businesses do it, and I think to a certain extent I did it when I was newer in business. You want to run a victory lap, and sometimes there's no time to run the victory lap, but you just stop and do it anyway, and then you dig out for another couple of years, from your wild exploits, financial exploits. So it's a common cycle that leads to business failure. So to discover that early is definitely a blessing. What was Oskar's, to your knowledge, what was Oskar's vision for Zestron? And has that vision changed over the years, particularly as you took over? And we'll get into how you took over in just a bit. I'm kind of jumping here, but on the subject of vision, what was it? How has it changed, if it has?
Well, I'm not a big fan of these vision and mission statements because oftentimes there are a lot of words and they sound all very similar.
Well, I think, I agree. I think mostly BS. They're basically beauty pageant speeches, right? I want to solve world hunger and have every country love each other.
Save everybody. We're not Bill Gates, I guess. We both can agree to that, and he might save the world. But, anyway.
He has a shot. Yeah, he has a shot. So.
He might have a realistic shot. No, I tell you what the real story was. The first set of products were also designated for surface cleaning, as I mentioned, pots, and then we went into consumer car care and bicycle and motorcycle care because that was we were driving dirt bikes as a hobby, and of course when you're 10 and 12 you love dirt bikes if you get one. We had one, and so we're doing that. Maybe that was a third of the Victory Lab you just mentioned. Maybe his way of having fun with the boys. I still have a brother and a sister, and we all did motocross for many years, and at some point you have to clean those, and 10-year-olds are not really interested in cleaning. As you can imagine, we'd like to drive them and have fun with them, but he got stuck with the cleaning. And so from cleaning a pot to cleaning a motorcycle, it wasn't that far of a stretch. And he developed the first product. It still exists in the US, although it's not our juice anymore, but the brand S100, maybe a lot of fans who ride Harleys, they know this product name. It's still market leader here in Europe. Hopefully one day we make it back to the US, would be nice. But apart from that, that was the first product line, and seasonal products, at least here in Europe, initially it was, and still to some extent it is a seasonal product. In the fourth quarter, first quarter, it's winter, typically here, especially in Germany. You don't care for your motorcycle or bicycle or your car. You don't polish it, you don't clean it, you don't wax it or treat it. So he had issues on revenue and on cash in the summer months and the fall and the spring. It's more of a summer product, and so it just chased him for many years, and it just the constant nagging. Sometimes how people nag and want certain things, and they're very persistent. That never went away, and that nagging led to him just being curious of what else he could do as a chemist, as somebody who cleans hard surfaces. And that was just the baseline of it, having that foundation of being able to know what cleans or what residue can be cleaned with what. And at the end of the 80s, early 90s, as we both know, some changes in the legislation came, and the fluorinated chlorocarbons weren't allowed anymore. And so that was sort of an entrepreneurial moment for him, a very successful one, I should add. He went to a customer, he read it somewhere in a newspaper that those were not allowed anymore. And by the way, they were used for electronics cleaning. He had no idea before, I think, and just read it somewhere and said, there's surface cleaning. Maybe that could lead to something. So he went to a customer, asked them if there was anything else that was recommended. And they all said, no, we don't know what's coming. So he went to his chemist, and they talked about the application, the residue, the solder paste, and so on. And that's what started the first product in what we call now the business unit of Zestron. And it led to a very successful journey.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And that was really the vision. The vision, then, once you start that, obviously you want to grow it. But if you have 5,000 sales or maybe even 100,000 sales, it's very bold to say, look, I want to be the global market leader. You don't even know all the competition. You haven't been around. So it's sort of in the beginning, I think it would be a lie to say there was a vision. There was a will to perform and be successful and have a second business unit. I think that was the vision, and not so much what it was in.
Yeah, it's funny. There's a very similar track with my company. It was the Montreal Protocol, which is what you were referring to when the solvents were banned that were used to clean circuit boards, which created a business opportunity. That's what brought me into the business. And you talk about mission statements and all that. I agree with you 100% that that most corporate mission statements are crafted by marketing departments, to look good. They try and hit every politically correct checkbox, in their quest to be accepted by as many consumers as possible. But I think there's also a degree of naivety that's almost a requirement to start a business, because if you really knew all the risks and all of the work and all of the money and everything, all the energy that one has to put into a business for rather poor odds of success, most people would just steer away from it. So I think that naivety is good. And at least in my case, and I'm curious if this happened in yours, you're highly educated. How, from a chemistry standpoint, how all these molecules work. That doesn't necessarily guarantee a success in business, right? Nope. So that's a whole different thing. And even people who graduate business school, I don't think have much more guarantee of success. There's a more of a native approach to business. And I, at least in my case, I was very grateful that I learned things at the proper time. There was a sequence to be aware of certain things. If I was aware of too much too soon, I never would have started a business. And so there's a sequence in learning, and it's quite orderly. And if circumstances or the universe or God or the business gods, whatever, decide that they're going to put you through their version of an MBA course, which we've all been through, that sequence is very helpful. It's just like going to college. You don't take higher level courses your freshman year of college, right? You'd never graduate. You'd drop out. So, speaking of college, you worked all the way through your Ph.D. At Johns Hopkins, and then you got drafted, or you invaded, or whatever circumstance, you ended up at Zestron Americas. Tell me about that journey. What made you step into the family business? And I think that happened after you graduated with your PhD. So what led you there? What was the motivation? Did your father ask you? Did you ask your father? What was the combination of events?
Well, the first, maybe go back a few years in the initial education. I was a young man at the time, and I decided to in school, I hated chemistry, to be fair. The teacher was terrible. My dad always faulted our kids for not, us, three, for not studying chemistry, but because he loved it so much. And typically what happens, kids don't necessarily do what their parents do. They want to do their own thing. And I always wanted to do my own thing anyway. So I first went into business. I did a bank apprenticeship, a system that you can do here for a couple of years when you're young. You learn about finance, and I was fascinated by how business operates and how they operate from a bank perspective. At least it was the initial entry into that. And in school, I really, you have sort of electives at the end of high school here, and the elective could have been chemistry, but I didn't. I had business and English, and those were the things I really had fun with. And chemistry, the teacher was terrible. And then I was drafted I had to go to the Army here for a year, a mandatory draft, and stuck for a year in a thing you really don't want to be is tough in one sense, but you have time to think about it. And the time I had, I decided to challenge myself and say, look, it's one thing to not like chemistry in school. It's another thing to, study it and then know that you don't like it, because studying is a little broader than just the few classes you have in school. I was between chemical engineering and chemistry and business, sort of the interests. And I looked at my dad, and like I said, I had a lot of time to think about it, and he had no say in that or impacted, or it was just me pondering in a separate room. I had nothing to do during the Army for the most part, so it wasn't very productive from a work standpoint, but productive from a preparation standpoint. And he's a chemistry major. He never studied any business. He learned it, as you said, by default and experience and trying. And so I said, man, if he can start a business, he never had a business course. Why do I need to do business? I might as well skip that all along and do something technical, because technicals, be it chemical engineering or chemistry, later on in life, it's very hard to learn and study and get that knowledge. It's easier to do it when you're young. So I didn't want to completely discard that, and said, look, I'm just give it a shot, 3 months of it, and then we'll see how it goes. And if I make it, I make it. If not, then I do something else. At least I tried it. So that was the first. And those 3 months were kind of tough, because I ended up at the university, and everybody else had these 2 years electives and I didn't. So sort of a catch-up game. And I caught up, and I found some disciplines of chemistry that I really liked. And so I started it. So I said, I'll finish it. And then I had the chance to come to the US, because I heard you can work in a lab. And here, lab work was sort of limited. Professor was very arrogant and typically very high up there. You couldn't talk to him, no interaction. And the US was all different. So I applied and got into Hopkins, and did that and succeeded in that. And, at night they would have, I figured out that you could do business class at night. Didn't have any other things to do at night. So I was bored. And so I started MBA class at night. And, obviously, story I just mentioned, I always liked business. I always liked then chemistry too, something technical, because you can't take that away from somebody. If you have a certain ground basis of knowledge, it's really helpful later in life. So I had chemistry, and I was doing most of that, and then 1 or 2 classes of MBA at night. And I would find all these motivated people who, in their spare time, it was voluntary. I mean, night classes typically continuing education. So you have people that are highly motivated because they would do that in their spare time on their own dime and so on. And I did that and did both of them. And then finally, when I finished, my dad, he would come over once in a while. The business was started in '96. The second business. First business was consumer products, but that for different reasons, long story, didn't turn out the way he wanted or was successful. Second time around, he came and said, I got another business here, and it's failing. And, you're just about to finish. Maybe you want to give it a go. And that was sort of long story to explain, but it sort of helps, I think, in understanding personalities and motivation. And so you have your dad come over and saying, you have a failing business, invested millions into it, and it wasn't working. And here I am at 28, not much work experience.
No pressure, Harry. No pressure.
Yeah. And I said, okay, well, let's give it a shot. Let's give it 3 months and see how it goes. Same thing. But it's tempting to fix something. It's tempting to help your father if he is in dire needs. It's tempting to help a company that probably supported your education financially to a large extent, although Hopkins actually paid me, which I'm very grateful for, and we're returning the favor. But it was similar to his coincidence in a different way. It was a different coincidence, but it was not something that was planned. Certainly, there was hope on his part when he started a business that at some point somebody in the family would be willing and able to do it. But it was one day to another. Hey, I got a chance. You want it or you don't want it. Otherwise, I close the shop. I'm done. And perspectives of trying it. Salary was decent, and certainly for a student, it was more than I expected. I was living on $1,000 a month, so anything more was great. What else could I do? I couldn't make it any worse. I mean, it was about to be shut down. It was nothing to be. It's only fixing. Everything I was doing better was making the company better, and so I gave it a shot, and that's how the story started.
I think we learn more from failure than we do from success. And if someone is only successful, we don't know if they're on a lucky streak or if that's really skill. I'd love to learn, without giving away any corporate secrets, I'd love to learn what your take on it, taking a business unit that was failing, arguably failing, and turning it around to something successful. That, to me, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of takeaways there, because there was a way of doing business which was failing, and then there was a way of doing business which was successful. So what are some of the basic, looking back, what are some of the basic components of failure that you were able to recognize and change to turn, not just to make it successful, but to change trajectory from going down to stabilizing to start ascending in terms of success?
Well, I ended up in a company of, it was less than 10 people, fewer than 10 people. And some of them, you get to know in the first couple of days. It might take you a week or two to figure out what makes or breaks a business. And so I came into a failing business, and the revenue wasn't good, not sufficient to carry the cost. So the first thoughts come to mind, and you look at the HR cost, which was the biggest piece at the time. You begin to go out to customers. I figured if we want to be successful, you better know what the customer wants, and you need to hear what you're providing or what you're not providing. Maybe the customer will tell us you're great. Maybe the customer will tell us you stink. I mean, your product are no good. Whatever feedback they would give me, I was just open ears. I mean, anything I would be able to change for the better would help the company make it. So my back was against the wall. I would have to ask for money to pay for payroll. It was something that typically the banks would do, and the startup would never get money unless you have some investors to back you. So financially, it was okay, not great, but at least enough to tie me over for a year or two to try to make it better. We couldn't afford salespeople, so we had a few engineers, one very dedicated who still just had his 20th anniversary with our company. We would work all day and all night to make this happen, and he realized how bad it was. I never specifically told him because I didn't want to share too many internals. I was very ashamed of where we are, and so it took a lot of feedback from outside to figure out what we were doing well and what we're not doing well. Out of that came new product development that would help to capture the needs of the market. Remind you, this was a European-founded U.S. company, so the products we had were European products. And when I talked to European guys and said, "Look, customers are complaining about the products; they're no good, or they're not what they need." "Oh, we don't have the problem over here. They work great. What do you want?" I said, "What I want is a product that works, and this is not it." So, it was an advantage that I had the same last name, so I could go to the boss of R&D. Who is also a wonderful person to work with, and his ambition was to help us solve problems. He wanted to formulate better products, so I opened a door that was already open, and so within probably the first year, we came out with the first new U.S. developed products for the U.S. market and U.S. customers. That was the first big point, because we made products and developed products that were significantly better mousetrap than the competition at the time. So if you have a product and no sales, so a D for that or an F, and then you have a marketing team of one who is probably at best a C to a C minus. It wasn't it was somebody who worked extremely hard and dedicated his life to the company basically, but he wasn't a Native American. So I was challenged by not being American. The whole team was not American, with the exception of a few admin staff. So you really had a C minus team, and the one thing that really helped us pull off some of the successes and win new customers in the very beginning was engineering and product performance. Those two things allowed us to at least change the trajectory of maintaining a sales or even losing sales to winning. Once the sales numbers go up, you start, now I can maybe hire a new engineer. Maybe I can hire somebody in product development. Maybe I can even think of a salesperson to help us boost and get the relationship up. I mean, if you send an engineer out like myself, a technical guy, I know I'm not a salesperson. I'm passionate and I know how to sell. But if I see a good salesperson, I know why we pay him a lot of money. They're just different animals, and a technical guy will never be a salesperson, but at least you can appreciate what they do. So seeing what we're missing and looking and reading the competition and learning from them a lot taught us that sooner or later we needed sales. But once you can afford them, great. If you can't afford them, you go as an engineer and you win maybe 2 out of 10 customers, because the other 10 you screw up because you're not a salesperson and you say the wrong things, you're too honest, whatever it is, you're not able to do the same job as a senior salesperson. But 2 out of 10 is not 0 out of 10. So it helps you. It helps you move along. It helps you move forward and grow a little bit. So it helps you reduce the financial burden. All of a sudden you can carry more of the HR cost. You move towards maybe a more sound P&L. your product development is positive and brings new spin in, then you go out and market it and try to use the money you have to at least get the word out. And little by little, the picture was changing to a more positive one. And the same goes for everybody who was part of the team. From the initial team that I met, there's only one person who stuck around and had a wonderful career. Everybody else left. And a lot of people in the beginning, when you have a failing company, you recognize the ones who want to be there and the ones who don't. And you figure that out within maybe a couple of weeks at the latest. And then you start sorting through that. And then, you start sorting through the sales channels. You try to figure out every individual discipline that leads to success, and you try to optimize it. And that was, I think, the job of the first 5 years.
You talk about you put most of your effort into creating engineering products before you built the sales team, which just makes perfect logical sense. A good salesperson can sell a bad product once, right?
Right.
They may not get a second chance, but but an average salesperson can sell a great product over and over and over again. So clearly, cart before the horse. You don't want to put cart before the horse. The horse has to be the engineering and the product development and all of that. Now you talked about your products were successful in Europe, but the same products here people didn't like in the early days. I'm not a chemist, but my understanding of chemistry is molecules work the same way in Germany as they do in the United States or anywhere else in the world. The laws of physics, the laws of chemistry are global. So that tells me there's a cultural difference, or there was some kind of perception when the same products that were working well in Europe weren't working well, or they were perceived as not working well here. So I'm curious, you run a global company. You have facilities on different continents in several different countries, which means you're dealing with different types of people, different cultures, different expectations. How long did it take to grasp for you? Your father probably figured that out already, but how did you personally get your head around all the different cultures and how to be the same company in every country, knowing you have to actually mold yourself a little bit different or portray yourself maybe a little bit more culturally appropriate, if that's the correct word. What were the challenges in dealing with multiple cultures, multiple currencies, multiple languages, all of that?
Well, it begins with I think to be fair, with a certain self-awareness, which I certainly didn't have at 28, but you have when you turn older. What you recognize, and that was as soon as I began working in the U.S., you sort of, the U.S. is wonderful in the sense of welcoming foreigners, and I had only good things to say about my whole experience. I'd do it again if I was given the chance to be younger. But one thing you also recognize is if you go to a certain state, you better be in a position to relate to the customers and their local culture. And the U.S. is very broad and different. And you go to New England, you go to California, you go to Texas, the customers will be different, obviously. And my best case, I'd say I'm half American. I love the U.S. I'd move there in a heartbeat, but now I'm here in charge for the entire company. So things have changed in a business personal relationship, but I can adapt, and I've adapted as much as I could. But my wife's American, and I know I'll never be, although I really wanted to. But you recognize the limitation of not being native, and if you recognize that was one of the big milestones, I think, for us as a company before we went international, to recognize that you cannot ever send local people around and pretend they're supposed to run the foreign shop. So if you look at our organization now, you call John in China or Dido in Japan or James in Malaysia or Ralph here. Anyone in senior leadership is local and will always be that way. And that was probably one of the first learning experiences, that we cannot send anybody from Germany around and pretend you know it better and you know how to run the business. So local leadership in the U.S. is U.S., and I always wanted it that way. I was the first and only hybrid, I would say, and I would caution any German or American company to start using their own management in a different country. It doesn't work. So that was lesson number one. And then you begin to appreciate if you're open-minded, and I always was, and I always enjoyed other cultures. I mean, my dad and my mother, they always encouraged us to go to France, to go to England, go to US as kids, and be just open your mind. I mean, Germany is not the center of the attention. US isn't either. China isn't either. We're all one global community, and everybody does it differently. And you know, some people say, well, we are successful. Well, the Chinese are successful too. The Americans are successful. The Germans are successful. Every state and country and personality can be successful in their own right. But there's multiple ways to Rome. There's not just one way to Rome. So you need to allow local management to do it their way and have the personality and ability to just not interfere. Just judge them by the numbers and the success, and that's it. And numbers tell you a lot of things, and not everything. So I typically, prior to Corona, I typically visited each site once a year just to greet and meet the people, get to know the new ones that started. We're a family business, so I typically know most of the people that we have, especially new ones in the last 2 years I haven't met personally, unfortunately, but I will as soon as I can. I'll travel again. But I find enjoyment in understanding the other cultures, in learning other countries, other languages, whatever it is. It psychs me and it fascinates me because they are successful in a different way. And you just have to appreciate that instead of judge it.
One of the things that is a requirement for running a business is motivation. Without motivation, you're nothing. Because particularly in the early days of a business, and I think maybe even arguably throughout the entire lifespan of a business, there are things that suck out your motivation, and just circumstances, maybe pandemics, maybe recessions, maybe competition, maybe whatever, new government regulation. What motivates you? How, as a business owner, do you keep motivated, and how do you spread that motivation?
Let me begin with why I am motivated, and I would argue that as a person, you are either motivated or you're not. To try to motivate somebody who's not motivated, good luck. I mean, I've never been successful, I can admit that. My motivation began at Hopkins. To go back a little bit, I mentioned it before, I had part of my chemistry education here in Germany. Very difficult to interact with professors. They wouldn't give you any time of the day. They just, they're not approachable. So with that mindset, I came to the U.S. and didn't know any better. But the first year of the 5-year stint, or 4.5 in my case, at Hopkins, your job was not only to sit in the class to learn the material that they were teaching you, but also to look for a professor, to interact with a professor, to try to get in his group. Because 4 of the 5 years are lab work. You do research, and for that research you get your degree. And in Germany, the education system was not focused or turned towards challenging you or making you ambitious or weeding you out from the non-performing ones. You could sort of cruise through the educational system with little to no effort. Which unfortunately to some extent I still regret, but I was able to cruise through, but it wasn't, the ambition wasn't created. And I see the US system being very different and a lot more targeted towards that, encouraging learning and making it fun and seeing what your development can be. That wasn't fostered in the US. So I had 2 things going for me. And one was obviously seeing what my dad has accomplished at that point in time. And the other one was sitting in a class, I think it was organic chemistry, and another student asked me, grad student in the first year, said, "What group did you pick?" And I said, "What do you mean? What, did you talk to any professors?" And I said, "You can talk to professors? Wow, that's interesting. okay, let me see. And, it took a 5 minutes of a conversation of 10, and I realized I was in the back of the line. If you're in the back of the line and you don't have one picked, by the time the 1 year's up, you get your master's, you get a handshake, and you're out. And that was just, I was sweating. I couldn't sleep. I was just, beside myself. I said, I'm not going to fail. And I think that was the moment when I changed. And I changed to never ever. It's sort of a make or break moment. And at that point, it just, everything changed for me. And it changed, I think, retrospect for the better, because all of a sudden there was ambition to perform and to perform and to perform. And that never stopped.
Wow, that's great. When you first entered the business, or maybe even before you entered the business, I'm sure you had in your head a definition of success. What was that definition of success when you were younger, and what is it today?
Well, when I was younger, I guess let's start at 28. Obviously, I'm faced with a failing business, as we discussed before. The initial goal was to turn it around, make it successful. We are now, for many years and probably more than a decade, profitable. That was my first goal. Second goal was to turn it over to U.S. management, to get me out, or at least not be the one who calls the shots in a country that I'm not native to. Although I wanted to, but I, took myself out of it. So that was the two first goals for the American business, obviously, and there were practical and clear goals and reachable goals and obvious ones, because that's what needed to be done for establishing the baseline to make this company successful, at least in the U.S. Once the U.S. was, the reason, maybe go back one step, the reason we wanted to be in the U.S. is, if you're in Europe and you have in the U.S. A business and you have you work on customers, back then, and I think to still a large extent now, although it's a little changing now, but if you go to Asia, you will be asked, are you qualified? And then you'll be qualified in certain headquarters, and they happen to be in the U.S. and Europe. So the logical step for us as a company was, there was a reason to go to the U.S. first, was to make it, to get to a point where you're successful in the US, you sit at the table when a customer makes a decision for cleaning a process. Back then, there were a couple of other US competitors, and they would always end up in Asia, and we wouldn't. So first step was to go to the US. Once we've had some light at the end of the tunnel, and we could see that it was turning into a successful business, and we were winning more accounts and being able to influence decisions in Asia, where a lot of the volume manufacturing was. Then the next goal was obviously to, as quickly as possible, grow it into a global company and plant ourselves in every possible market where circuit boards are manufactured, and become the number one in the world. Had to be the plan, because size-wise, at that point in the beginning, we weren't the biggest. So if you're not the biggest and your competition's knocking in the door, obviously you want to gain more market share, and what better goal than set yourself than to be the number one? And so that's been our goal, and I think we've been pretty good at achieving that.
Yeah, I've watched the journey. It's been impressive. What keeps you up at night?
Not much. Talking about learning, I had a lot of conversation with my father, and you typically have in a situation like this. And obviously some discussions are not as pleasant as others, because he seems to know it better. Sometimes you're the young one and you want to know it better. So there's a lot of that sometimes, and certainly to some extent we had that. But there's also things that if you're open enough, you can learn and you can listen. And you can listen not only to him, you can listen to everybody who's more senior in the company. And I tend to do that. I don't always know it, and I don't even want to know it. I just talk to the people that do know it and ask them for that advice. And so having the opportunity to learn from others is extremely rewarding, and it helps you to put things in perspective.
What's been your most satisfying moment in business?
I think what is most satisfying is, it's hard to put it in one, but since I would say a very competitive person, I would say winning competitive accounts. And there's some that you lost initially, let's say 10 years ago, due to circumstances and situations at the time, various ones. And 10 years later, you win them based on performance and good engineering and honest people. Those are moments that you just cherish. You just sit back and you wish you could pop 10 champagne bottles. You don't, but have your victory lap, whatever it is, it's sort of the moments of success, or at least late success, and the persistency. If you want to win Olympics, or you want to be good in a sport, you train for many years, and you can't do that overnight. So those are similar comparisons to this long-term haul of winning accounts and having that satisfaction. But going back to one thing you said before, what keeps me, I didn't finish it 100%, but I've learned to delegate, and I listened, and I learned to let go. And when I go home at night, it's my family. And of course, if someone in the US or in China calls, I picked up the phone, and I'm always available. It's not bad. But if you give local people and everybody who works for you responsibility to make their own decisions within reason, obviously not, sell the company or any of that, but within reason, they will run. And everybody who works in a company, I would say, the people who are ambitious and want to accomplish something, they're honored by being given responsibility and be able to decide for themselves. And if you set up the company in such a fashion, you can go home at night and sleep, and nothing wakes you up, unless facility burns down and somebody calls you. Obviously, I pick up the phone, but typically I don't have any issues sleeping. And so that's one of those things. And most rewarding thing is, if I had to name one, or some of the early accounts that we didn't win that we now won or about to win, those are just priceless. It's not so much the sales you win, it's sort of finally we've convinced the customer that our product is better, and maybe we had a more reasonable, objective customer to compare and confirm that we had a better product offering. It's very frustrating to know you're better in an evaluation, for instance, and then not get the customer because of other reasons. I can cite many others, but you asked me for one, but that will be my answer.
I think in my case, and it sounds like if I were to paraphrase what you just said, it's this sense of legitimacy. You finally get the order, not because you discounted your way into it, but because
Right.
the customer realized you were the best choice. I cherish that feeling. And when you're a brand new company, there is no legitimacy, right? You're the
Right.
new player on the block, and if someone wants to buy your equipment, they think they're going to get something out of you because you're the new player on the block. So you pay the dues, you discount your prices, you make no money, you provide way more service than you should, perhaps, in order to just compete. And then eventually, I think we all, if we survive long enough, we all hit that plateau of a legitimate product. The product earned its way in, as opposed to buying its way in. And to me, that is an incredibly satisfying experience, to have the world stage look at your products and say, yeah, those are best in class. We're going to get it, not because it's cheaper, not because we like the salesperson, but the products work. And in our business, yes, relationships are very important, but product performance is more important. Like I said, you can sell it one time, or you can sell it repeatedly. And the difference between one time and repeatedly is whether a product is well designed and performs as expected. What advice would you give, looking back at all these years now of experience running a company? What advice would you give for budding entrepreneurs with this pandemic, with the shift in business? There's probably a few people who have lost their jobs and are either contemplating jumping back into the workforce, or maybe that idea in the back of their head that they've had for 30 years is haunting them. So I think there's a open opportunity right now for people to hit that fork in the road and maybe choose the route of entrepreneurship. So what advice would you give to anyone considering jumping away from the the full-time job, guaranteed paycheck, to the uncertainty of business?
In short, I would say do it immediately. In longer words or more words, there's nothing more rewarding to start your own company than doing it. Especially having somebody who tells you what to do. No way. You want to decide for yourself, even if it's a rotten decision, it doesn't matter. You have to face the consequences, and being on your own is the best feeling that you can have, even if it's not going to be the next Google or the next Facebook. It doesn't matter. It's your company, and you can feel it in so many ways. So that would be my short and sweet answer.
I like it. Do it right away. Do you think there's an opportunity now greater than perhaps in the past for entrepreneurship? Is this good timing?
Good timing. If you're procrastinator, you won't start. So I don't think the timing matters. The matter is, are you willing enough and able enough to make it, give it your best shot? And if the will, just like so many examples I said before, but if the will is there, you don't look at the time. You work every day and night, and you want to make it successful and make it into your own. There's nothing else like it. So nobody needs to motivate you. You will be motivated, because it's like having a child and raising it. Same thing.
You're committed at that point.
Yeah.
Yes. And you love your child no matter what. Same
Correct.
with business. You love your business no matter how much it costs you, no matter how much it gives you stress, no matter, and businesses, I think, like children, they go through troubled teenage years and all of that, right?
You're right.
It's never quite completely stable. Last question, Harry. What, in the world of percentage of luck, percentage of skill, what would you rate your experience to be? How much of your success and the company's success was based on luck, and how much was based on skill?
No, that's a good question. I'd say 70-30 skill or ability or willpower or whatever criteria. And luck always comes, I think, when you're giving it everything you have and trying as hard as you can, because people and customers can feel it. They know you're trying to do the best you can, come up with new ideas, come up with new products or solutions for them. And that excitement, you can see in people's eyes. I always saw it in your eyes, Mike. When you started a company, I could sense it. You were the one who was driving the boat. You wanted it to succeed. And you can see it. You can see it in the people who start the businesses. There's no, you will make it. And that commitment or focus you have to have, otherwise you will probably not make it. And then when you work that hard and you want it to happen, then sometimes you have luck and it helps you. But just luck, I think the other way around in percentages, I would hesitate to say that will oftentimes lead to success.
Yeah, I agree. And looking at your company, I think I would give it I agree with 70-30. I think there's an awful lot of skill involved, and no one does this without some degree of luck. Sometimes things fall from the sky and just land in your lap, and usually right when you need it most. I do have this philosophy. I call it the sales god philosophy, and this is not a religious statement. I just call it the sales god. And this was proven to me years and years and years ago. If you put the work in, if you put the effort in, business will come.
Right.
It's like shoveling coal into a furnace to run a boiler, for a steam train. If you just shovel coal in, the train moves down the track. And the irony was, I would put the effort in, I would put the work in, and business would come, but not from what I was working on. It would just come from somewhere else. It's just cause and effect. You create this amount of energy, and energy comes to you. And I'm not talking a metaphysical, new agey kind of thing. It's just, I call it the sales god principle, for lack of any other description. If the work is put in and the effort is put in for long enough, success will come. And it may not come from where one thinks it will come from. Maybe, you work on company A, for years, and all of a sudden company, B, C, D, and E all come in. And, but that was a result of the effort put in. Well, that's one of the reasons we put so much effort into education. We don't sell, we don't run ads. We put effort into education. To me, that's just energy into the system, energy into the universe, and business comes from that. Sometimes we can't even draw a line between a particular educational effort and this particular customer who bought from us. But it's just, I don't know, we make the sales gods happy, and that's what you guys are doing as well. In fact, I think you guys do probably more education than anyone in your space with educating customers, because educated customers make educated choices. And like you, I consider our company an educated choice. I consider your company an educated choice. And you can only talk about how pretty your bottle is and how nice the fragrance is for so long. At some point, people have to understand what separates a good product from a less good product. And it's, I think that's what separates a commodity product from a value-added product, right? Anyone can sell a commodity.
100%.
All right, Harry, this has been a long time coming. I've wanted to talk to you. I did a similar interview with you for SMTA a year or two back, and that kind of whet my appetite to get a little deeper on this show. So I really appreciate you taking the time and talking to me and my audience about your journey with Zestron. And I find it very inspiring, and I've learned a lot from you over the years. You and I have had a very interesting relationship over the years. I think we were both young and, dare I say, arrogant. At least I was. And when we're building our businesses, we are bulls in china shops, and sometimes we break a few dishes. But I'm happy we were able to glue those dishes back together and become friends and colleagues. And even our competition, I'm a big believer, our competition, I'm grateful for our competition, and I'm sure you are too, in the context of they help legitimize what we do, as an industry. They're all, they all have the same goal of making products more reliable. They put, they feed the sales gods as much as we do, and that just is good for the entire industry. So I'm grateful for competition. It keeps us sharp. It does, push the ego button from time to time for me, but it's healthy. It's healthy ego. And if it weren't for competition, we'd be sitting on our laurels. And I don't think we would have ever created a better product.
That is very well said, Mike. I'm so grateful we have good competition, strong competition. We've learned so much from them, and I think they from us. And in the end, what both of us, or whoever the competition is, what the suppliers did, they provided the customer a better product, because you sort of aspire to be as good as them. They aspire to learn from you. It goes back and forth like a ping pong game. And at the end, the quality gets better. And that means the customer is going to have a better service, a better product, and a better offering. And then we all win. And that's sort of how I see it. So I agree 101% with you. If you're not encountering enough competition, you become complacent. Absolutely. And that's the end of it. That's the beginning of the end.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Harry, this has been fascinating and insightful, both. So thank you so much for all the time you've given. I'll let you go so you can have dinner. You're in Germany. I'm here in California. I'm just starting my day. You're wrapping yours up. So are you at your office right now in Ingolstadt?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Beautiful building, by the way. Anyone that happens to be in that part of the world in our industry, definitely take a tour. It's a very impressive facility and campus, I would even say. So, well, thanks again, Harry. Continued success, and look forward to actually seeing you at some point in the near future.
I'm here. Let's have dinner and a beer.
That I'm in.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Harry.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, me
Take
too.
care.
Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Concept to Creation podcast. If you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, please be sure and subscribe. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and virtually wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening to this in the car and you would like to see the video version of this as soon as you get home, as soon as you get back to the office, be sure and search for us on our YouTube channel, the Concept to Creation YouTube channel. When you're on the YouTube channel, be sure and hit the subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you'll be notified of new episodes as soon as they're released. We do release new episodes on the first and third Tuesday of each month. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
And I was meant to be free, meant to be free.